Hey guys, we're back. It's
Yeah.
Juan Escobar and Austin James with another episode of Chop It Up, and I think this is our eighth one, right? So
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Hard to
we're back at
believe.
it. Back at it with Renovation of the Heart today, and we'll be going through some thoughts from chapter 6 today. So yeah, Austin. In this chapter, right, Dallas Willard's talking about uh, the thoughts that we have as part of our human self, right? So he breaks it down into some details for us, right? And so what we'll be sharing today with you guys, viewers, is the four aspects of what it
Hmm.
makes up a thought. So, or what goes into a thought, even. So for my first question for you, Austin, uh, do you ever audit the ideas you hold to and see if they're true?
I do. But I think it'd be good before we jump into talking about ideas, kind of give them the summary of the
Okay.
four aspects, and then I'll talk about
Yeah,
idea.
that's good.
So the big thing about what the four aspects of the thought realm are, or what Juan just asked about initially, is ideas, images, information, and thinking. But those are the four aspects of the thought realm. So the first one is idea. And how I first describe that before I get into your question about auditing is
Yeah.
that ideas are very general models of or assumptions about reality. And then another thing he says about an idea is that they are so pervasive and essential to how we think about and how we approach life that we do not even know that they are there or understand when and how they are at work. So again, these are ideas, this
Repeat
first
that.
aspect
Maybe that was the
of,
last two sentences again.
oh
Repeat
yeah,
the
yeah.
last
So yeah, last two sentences, that ideas are so pervasive and essential to how we think about and how we approach life that we often do not even know they are there or understand when and how they are at work.
one. Yeah.
So he gives a really good example about how this happens in the temptation of Eve in the Garden of Eden, that how Satan got to her is that he didn't draw Eve away from God with a stick. He didn't hit her with a stick, but with an idea. And that it was the idea that God could not be trusted and that she must act on her own to secure her own well being. That this is the idea behind what we call temptation. And that in temptation, God is presented as depriving us by his commands of what is good. So we think we must take matters into our own hands and act contrary to what he said.
Yeah.
This image of God leads us to pushing him out of our thoughts, as discussed in previous chapters, and putting ourselves on the throne of the universe. The condition of the ruined soul in the world naturally results from this idea. But again, this is this idea, but an idea has the ability to do this to us. So, given what I've described about an idea, the technicalities of it, that's why, with your question about do I audit my ideas, because I feel I don't systematically do this, the way I kind of audit my ideas is that I hold to what I believe to be true in a very detailed and in a reverence to what I believe. But what I do is kind of treat that as an anchor. And I have certain intensity levels. And I'll give an example too about one that there's certain things that I will defend and critique the other viewpoint of an idea that I hold to. Those are ones that I hold to a pretty high level of intensity, but more loose levels of ideas. So this is part of my auditing is just knowing what an idea ranks my idea. But one that I'll just say, because it is a loose idea, I don't mind the idea of being out there, the idea of what the age of the world is. So the technical terms are whether or not in the church, whether you're a young Earth creationist or an old Earth creationist. But because it's of a lower intensity for me, I don't even mind bringing up the idea. And whoever wants to debate, I was like, I'll let them hear them out. But what I say when I have a lower priority is I say, hey, I don't really care about debating this. But people that do care will say, hey, you're an idiot for not debating this. But I say the term, I lean towards old earth creationist. but I don't seek to debate young earth creationists, and I don't seek to correct misconceptions about old earth creationism. Because if I did care and I did have the capacity to do that, I would do both of those. I would critique the young earth position, and I would seek to clarify the old earth position. But that's how an audit would look for me, and why it doesn't happen to one of those, because of how I've ranked it. So that's how I describe like what my auditing process looks like for ideas.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to my way of thinking, maybe it's not so much as far as the detail goes, right? I think I was rethinking it right now, and I think the way I describe it is just like, since I value truth, I want to see if it's true, right? And so I really like to, and we'll talk about this later in our further, or like as we talk about thinking later on, but just trying to make sure that I have like a clear understanding of the truth. And so I like to see different perspectives, and just be able to see if it turns out to be true in that way. And so mine's more just like the idea. I don't know. It just fascinates me, and so I want to make sure that I understand the idea clearly, and then always make sure that it's the truth. So there's actually another sentence here from Dallas Willard's ideas section that I really liked, and it has to do with changing ideas. And so I think like that's the hard part, and I think for me, like, that's the fun part, is because it's so hard to change an idea sometimes. I think that's something that I find intriguing in order to go through that process. But as we're going to see here, it's not that easy. So he says, to change governing ideas, whether in the individual or the group, is one of the most difficult and painful things in human life. Genuine conversion is a wrenching experience. So, I think if we go back to my testimony, we know that was a difficult process for me. So like I really related with this quote this idea he put right here. And so, I think that's the other thing too, right? Is that I feel that sometimes, when you, and I don't know if I see this with debates, right? But I think for people, it's just hard to just want to change ideas. Like we cling so tightly to what we already believe that the work that it would take in order to change that idea is sometimes really hard for people to do. And so I think that's the fun part for me, though, is like, dude, I know it takes work. I know it takes putting in the time and effort to see different perspectives on an idea. So yeah, I enjoy it. And then I think that's the reason why I do audit, because I do want to make sure that I'm seeing things in a true way. So I would say that's the way I go about it when it comes to auditing ideas.
I was thinking too, I forgot to add about my auditing process. I was talking about things that I hold to a lower priority, but ones that I do want to learn more about in that specific subject. Maybe later down the line I'll want to know more. But the process about me identifying a proper teacher, it's just two simple metrics I look for when I'm looking for someone to provide me more information about an idea. Is the teacher has to hold my attention. That's right. I just have to be honest. Like, if I'm just listening to someone that's boring me, I'm obviously not retaining anything they're saying. So they have to be a relatively engaging speaker, and then they have to be saying something new. If it's something that I'm trying to audit my idea in a process, I'm always looking for someone bringing that fresh perspective to an idea. So I forgot to add that yeah, I look for reliable teachers. But when someone's in that camp, because my two-headed monster as far as preference, as far as like pastors within the church, is I love how engaging like a Matt Chandler is, but then I also love, he's like the top of the engagement level for me. But as far as thought-provoking goes, Tim Keller is on that other spectrum. But of those two dynamics. They're the two pastors that kind of represent that to me as far as popular pastoral culture goes for me, that they bring that to the table. But yeah, that was one thing I forgot to add.
That's good. So next question would be, since images is the second one, right? I got this question, and it goes, since images are associated with feeling, how important is it to monitor what images we are taking in? So.
Yeah, and I like how he describes what an image is that by comparing it with what an idea is, that he says images are always concrete or specific, as opposed to the abstractness of ideas, and are heavily laden with feeling. So just like you were saying too about, there's such an importance to them, us discerning what images go through. And I'll get to that about focusing about what negative images do to us. But I really like what a sentence he gave. It's kind of a random note, but the sentence he gave about the image of the cross. But I love the sentence he gave about that before I give my answer to your question, that he said, the cross presents the lostness of man as well as the sacrifice of God and the abandonment to God that brings redemption. So if there's this lostness, got to take on what Jesus did on the cross to then bring about that redemption.
Yeah.
So given that, that's how powerful an image can be in a positive sense of bringing redemption. That's why this terrible way of executing someone is like the symbol for Christianity now, is that God redeemed that image. So it's interesting. He redeemed such a horrific image to be the symbol of redemption. So, God's in the business of making moves like that. But the point I wanted to bring about why it's good to filter your images, because two areas that can really affect, if you see these type of images, can really affect you. They'll sear your conscience. But I thought of the two worlds of, like, if you're seeing a lot of violent images and a lot of sexual images. So these are things that can be very graphic in the way that they're depicted. But what they do is I said the term, they sear your conscience, but another way to think of it too about seeing kind of graphic images is that they dilute your reverence. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Okay.
If you we know, Austin, it's just entertainment. It's fake. Obviously, that's why we watch people like literally getting killed. Or it's supposed to be, it's presenting us a story. So in that story there could be violence a part of it. But what it does is when we were talking about this, is like when you see real violence, you're not affected by it as much. If you are constantly filling your mind with violent images, that's the point. You should be, you should find it absurd, or you should find it disastrous to see violence. Is that the image of God is being marred? That's a terrible thing to happen. So that's what I was saying, is you dilute your reverence towards the image of God. And then sexual union, if you have a lot of sexually explicit images you're filtering through your brain, you are overstimulating yourself to something that was supposed to be this union between a husband and a wife in a monogamous relationship. So if you've made your brain this sexual buffet, when you get down to if you actually have a marriage, or if you're in the midst of your marriage, you dilute the reverence of just the singular act with a singular person. They have certain, boundaries to the behavior they want to engage in. So if you are viewing behaviors your spouse or your future spouse is not going to be comfortable with, you've taken your fantasy life, you've taken your images to a level that she cannot behave at. And so that's what I'm saying. It concludes that world of images, that it dilutes your reverence towards monogamous sex. If you're constantly filtering, so why is, looking at porn or anything, why is that sin? It dilutes your reverence of sex. That's really what it does. Just balance your reverence towards a human being.
Yeah. I'm in agreement with that. And the way I would see it is, I think that, another thing too, I liked how Dallas pointed out that images are always concrete or specific, and then that ideas are more abstract. So it's kind of like, what is it out there? I don't know how people describe abstract, right? But it's out there, and I feel like that images kind of just give you that detail, right? That specific image of what something is, and so and maybe abstract is more heady. Is that how you describe it? Maybe just that it's kind of not very defined. It's just out there. If that makes sense, but yeah. So in saying that, I think that I'm in agreement with you that images do affect you, and so I think that we're kind of like these. The way I see it is that we're like computers, right? We're taking this in, these images in, and like that's kind of what we end up valuing is the things that we're constantly taking in. That just keeps getting repeated in there, so we associate with that, and it's something that is meaningful to us because of it. So I think that it's important to monitor that, because that is literally what's setting up your perception on how you see things and think about things. Like if you're, you use violence, right? But like, I guess on a positive flip, like let's say you're looking at beauty all the time. I mean, I would say that's what your mind's focused on is beauty. Like you can pick it out, from the world. You're walking around, you're like, oh, this thing is beautiful. So, that's a good way, right? That, or a good thing that you're, I guess, programming yourself to be able to look at. And
it can lead to thankfulness, gratitude.
Right.
But my point was that when you oversaturate yourself, and specifically like sexual beauty, that's something it's supposed to be in a private context. So if you saturate yourself with it, completely takes you on a wrong angle.
I agree. And so, and because of that idea, I think too, it's, when it comes to our spiritual life, man, like I think that's where the discipline comes in, right? Like we've talked about disciplines, man. So the more often we can, what's that one verse where it's, is it in Galatians, where it's like the command to everything that's pure, everything that's good.
Oh yeah, you're actually thinking of Philippians 4:8.
Yes.
Remember I talked about, like, that's how I remember that it was. It's after the prayer verse in Philippians 4:6-7. I was like, oh, the pure, think of things that are pure and holy. That's Philippians 4:8.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think that's where this kind of plays in, right? Is like the more images we can have that represent God and all the qualities and things that have to do with the spiritual life. I think that, in a sense, I guess to use a technical term, it programs us to just be in tune.
And I was thinking about that too, about what you're bringing up about Philippians 4:8. That's possibly why people get types of visions of what they want to do within, here on earth to advance the kingdom of God, is because they've been thinking their mind on heavenly things. So they have all these ideas, the first aspect, that becomes an image, the vision. So that kind of just, you connected the dots for me about, if you're constantly flooding your mind about thinking of heavenly things, you will create a heavenly image you want to produce on this earth.
Yes, I'm in agreement with you. So, yeah, man. So that's all I got, unless you got anything else.
That was, what I got from yours,
Yeah, so the third one was information, right? And before we go into that, though, I do like this connection that he makes between ideas and images. He says, but ideas and images are also a primary stronghold of evil in the human self and in society. They determine how we, quote unquote, take the things and events of ordinary life. So when I read that, that reminded me of perception, right? So that's kind of like the association I make, is that using ideas and images, like that's how we're perceiving the world as well. So that, I think, ties into what I was saying with the programming. Is like literally what we're thinking about as far as ideas go, and the images we can think and even just see in the world, like that's kind of how we perceive things and the way we approach life. So that was just something interesting. I liked how he tied that in together. So
yeah, that is good.
So yeah, so the third one is information now. And so my question to you then is, have you ever lacked information before? And if you have or haven't, how important do you think it is to seek information out?
Oh yeah, I've definitely been in that camp, and yeah, I'm not having it. It's been very stressful, but I like how it's just kind of, this is his most technical explanation of what this characteristic or this aspect of the thought realm is that it's kind of, since the foundation for which any thinking happens, it's the meat of the substance, it's the data by which you're able to think is what information is, and so that's why it's an aspect of our thoughts. But I just like one little quote before I get into why it stressed me out. Again, this kind of shows the reverence of why having good information is so important. As
Okay.
he brings up that failure to know, so this is information about God, failure to know what God is really like and what his law requires destroys the soul, ruins society, and leaves people to eternal ruin. So then he brings up Hosea 4:6 that I like to quote often when I'm thinking about knowledge, is that my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And then another one later on in that chapter, verse 14, it says, people out without understanding comes to ruin. So I think that's something that God's put in me, is the desire to want to have good information. So that's why I was telling you, it makes me nervous. I don't have it. So that's led into a ditch where I've fallen into, where intellectually I can say, yes, we're not going to know everything, so we have to ask questions. But I've taken it too far with the desire to always want to have the answer, that I see it as a weakness whenever I have to ask for help. So that's my pride. That's something that I struggle with valuing information, and just a little quirk that I've had even growing up with wanting to gain as much information as possible. And my family, rightfully so, has made fun of me for this, that I ask a lot of random kind of quirky questions, but it's me trying to figure out all the little ins and outs of an idea, as I ask these very random, very specific questions, because I'm trying to figure things out. But like I said, that I'd say that's a good thing, that it's why I'm an independent thinker. It's why I'm a creative thinker, is because I do that. But when it goes too far, my nerves is like when I realize I don't have the information and I don't ask for help. But that's what I've said too, is the number one thing I've probably got out of this, my job at the bank these past 3 years, is every single day to a situation where I don't have the answer and I have to ask for help.
Gotcha.
So all the other reasons, that's why I say I appreciate my job at the bank, that on a character note, God has definitely, while it's God sent and God has used that job, it's like he's helping. Because for the past 3 years, I've had to ask at a minimum one question to my coworkers and my supervisor of getting the right information to be able to answer a question or accomplish a task. So thankfully, God is gracious, and he knew this was something, because I value information, I would then take it too far. He's helped this job bring balance in my life for not having information.
Yeah. So on my end, I'm like definitely in the camp of lack information, so and I think this just comes from my background, right? Just knowing that my parents are immigrants, from El Salvador, and so the fact that even their education level wasn't up to par to the U.S. is like, I've always just felt that I'm just uninformed, and so like I am constantly seeking information. I'm like, anything new that I feel that is important, I will like try to make sure that I like sear that in my brain for future use. And then I'm also like just observing how I guess people interact, how people just do things, and even just observe to collect data. That's the way I would say it. It's just like I'm always trying to get new information. So I think that's also like a big fear of mine, is to like be uninformed. And so I think that's why I seek out information. And then when it comes to just thinking as well, I think that allows me to really just understand things at a deep level, if that makes sense. It's just I'm constantly trying to get new information if there's something new that I learn, like I adjust with that new information. So yeah, I think that's my approach on information. So anything else you got on that?
That's it.
Cool. So for the last one, the last aspect, right? The what is it? The thinking one.
Yeah.
My question to you is there a right way or practice to pursue good thinking today? You can be misled by those who are doing it wrong, right? So that's the, I guess, truth that I've seen is like you can be misled by whatever it is, by an idea not being true, an image not being true, or lack of information, right? So like what's a good way to practice good thinking?
Yeah, that's the key to even classify something good or bad. You got to know what it is. So I liked his definition of it in the book about what is thinking. So this final aspect that makes up the thought realm, the actual thinking part, is that he describes it as the activity of searching out what must be true or cannot be true. So that's the good or bad thinking. And he said, in the light of given facts or assumptions, it extends the information we have and enables us to see the larger picture, to see it clearly and to see it wholly. And it undermines false or misleading ideas and images, like you're saying, bad ideas and images as well. And then lastly, it reveals their falseness to those who wish to know.
To
It
those
is a powerful gift.
to those who
To those who wish to know.
okay.
So falseness is revealed to those who wish they know. And then last sentence, it is a powerful, thinking is a powerful gift of God to be used in the service of truth. So that's what he's talking about, is that it's this process of discerning truth. And so that's where I came up with this idea of when you're discerning truth, when you're thinking, what you have to do is you think of something, you have to think completely, and then you have to think deeply.
Yeah.
So that's the aspect, is you got to completely do it. So aspects of thinking completely about a subject is you have to actually listen. So part of listening is making sure you understand what the other person's saying. Not representing what someone's saying is called a straw man fallacy. It's where you incompletely address someone's argument. When you give a you give a straw man, you give a weak version of their argument.
Yeah.
What I like to is kind of growing around some debate circles is probably the best thing you can do is steel man someone's argument. That means to say the argument better. If there's a better way to say that argument, even if they didn't say it, you say it for them. That's how I got the guy I was reaching out to, reading the Bible with, the once atheist, now Christian, is he'd bring up typical objections to Christianity. I say, bro, you haven't even skimmed the surface, man. Why don't you bring up this? I actually got him his corner and became a better atheist than him. So that's even been, as I've told you, what I've tried to do as I've tried to minister to people that I would classify as having bad thinking, is if I say someone's in a cult, I become a more zealous cult member than them. When I was reaching out to some Mormon missionaries, I spent about 50 hours of research just to have a 2-minute conversation. But I try to understand all the different ways. So I thought completely over subject. And then I thought deeply. And how you do that is looking to the past and looking to the future. Is once you've understood what the idea is, you look at all the different aspects of it, but you look to the foundation. So a simple way to look to the foundation of certain idea systems. So like with Islam, you're going to want to look at Muhammad. You want to learn more about Buddhism, you probably want to go look at the life of Buddha. So obviously with Christianity, look in the Gospels, look at the life of Jesus. That's a good way to understand the idea system that has the image of the cross, that has many different thoughts with it of Christianity, is look to the foundation. So that's the key too, is you forecast. Once you kind of understand the foundation of a thought and all the ideas associated with it, say, where does this take us? where would this go? Because that's what you can do. When I was bringing up too about when I was trying to minister to Mormon missionaries, understand their idea. I've often told you, example, one too, is that if their view of God's nature is that it changes, and their highest prophet can discern when God wants to change his mind on an idea, that he's not the ever-changing God. He's not the beginning and the end. He's not the Alpha and the Omega. His nature is static, that he is the origin of goodness. They once had a practice, because they believed black people had the curse of Cain on them, that they could not be added into the priesthood. But then they, after some societal pressure, because of this race notion, 1979, they changed their mind. So that's forecasting. It's saying like that makes perfect sense that they would do something like that. They would say that the world had to correct them on their religious beliefs, because they had an origin of thought that their view of God is that he became this eventually. So if he became it, he can still upgrade his ways of thinking on certain things. But that was just one, that's my clearest example I can see. It was like, we can see that in history where they literally did that as a religious group. They had one way of thinking of it before. And, again, we'll look at Mormons, look at the foundation, Joseph Smith. But as far as the example of forecasting, looking at it deeply, is you say, okay, because they thought God could change, it led to them changing their God changing his mind on this specific issue. This race being a leadership position within their group. So yeah, again, just to summarize, that's my idea of if you want to engage in good thinking, think about it completely and also deeply.
Right. So, am I right? We're not saying like that is the way to do it, right? It's just like a correct form to make sure that it is good thinking.
Again, someone could just engage in deeper thinking, as I feel we're going to lay out, I've laid out, you're going to lay out aspects to think of, good ways to think, but there could also be other ways to think. Yeah. And for us to even discern whether or not they said another good way, I'd have to listen completely to what that person said, and then discern is that they offered another perspective on how to think deeply. But I first have to hear them out. So again, I think I've given a pretty good diagram, unless someone's like, it's not two things, also there's a third layer to it. I'm like, okay, exactly. I'd hear them out and be like, okay, you've fulfilled my diagram. You thought deeper about thinking deeply, and you are correct.
Exactly. So yeah, and speaking of perspective, like that's my approach as well, right? Is that as you said, I think I try to listen well. I try to make sure that I hear them completely in order to make sure that I'm understanding what they're saying. And so I even like to question it further, is just ask questions to gain that clarity. But then I guess in my way of thinking too, though, I like to think in perspectives as well in order to try to get it to go deeply. And so as I was thinking about even just these 4 qualities, I think the way I go about it is to make sure that I'm not lacking any information. So I think that's why I ask those questions, and then even just critique the perception, right? It's like, I like to make sure that, is it true, right? Like, is it true? Because otherwise I'm already flawed by the fact that my perception is wrong. So I think that's even why I like to examine different perspectives in order to see if I can find that.
Well, that'd be good too, is define, how do you define something as true? You're asking the question, is it true? But what does that even mean to you, that something's true? Or how do you discern if something's true?
So I've looked to see, I like to find the definition of things. It's like the definition of truth, right? Like, what is truth, right? Well, when it comes to our faith, right? Like, Jesus says, I am the truth, the way, and the life, right? So like, if I believe that's true, then everything else has to align with what he says. And so like, I think that's the standard that I use, right? Hoping that it's truth, right? And so then I examine the perspectives, right? And so like, I keep adjusting with the things that I end up finding out that, hey, like, this actually isn't true. So if that makes sense, that's how I go about it. Just try to make sure, with understanding completely that something is true, in order to gain that perspective. and see if that's true, if that makes sense. So that's how I would go about it.
Yeah. I still think it's your affirming process, but yeah, the simple way I say it was truth is that it's just a reflection of reality. That's kind of just repeating the words, but what I'd say too with truth is something that reflects as a pattern. Like literally this behavior will create life. I guess that's what I tie into a truth, is that truth will majority of the time deal with either avoiding destruction in a situation, and it'll also create life. So that's what I even say too, is the kind of phrase that another friend I've talked about, in the relationship podcast, as you go through the dating process, is this question of, does it give life? So I never even thought about that too, is that the best way you can discern if something is truthful is it life-giving? Yeah. So that's even what I was saying when I was talking about, like, obviously violence is something you don't want to flood yourself. We got a visitor. It finally happened. We're wondering live if it would. But violence obviously deprives life. He's not going to go away.
15 more minutes.
It finally happened.
But
yeah, him being at the door didn't allow us to continue our conversation, did not provide life. But same thing, violence like literally takes away life. And then if you're just sexually fantasizing, you're not actually in the sexual union with a spouse that literally creates life. So that's why it's a behavior that would not be the best to engage in. But so I just never thought about that as I was thinking deeper about what you were saying, is that the best way to discern truth is whether or not it's life-giving or not.
I can agree with that. Yeah, because I feel like truth is life. Yeah. Also order as well. Like if there's no order in
yes,
that, I think too that usually is flat.
Yeah, and I understand it's simple what I said, but I guess for me, I never saw those terms as synonymous. I guess I was like, oh, life on this side, and then if it's true, I guess I saw life. When I think of that word, I think of it more of an experience. You experience life, and then truth is like that abstract we talk about. Truth is just like this ethereal idea. So that's why I kind of made those distinctions, but they're on that same wavelength. So yeah, you saying that just made me connect those dots.
Well, then here's another thing I'm thinking now is that I think life would be the image of truth, right? And so order is
that's a great way to put it. Yeah,
the representation.
That's even what I was saying, is that life is like an experience, so it would be like this image, and then the truth is this idea. So that's that connection point. No, but I like that. That connects even further.
So there you go. That's how I would process.
What I was saying too is like the word. I was saying earlier about when we're talking about images, that the word, there's this word redemption, but the cross is an image of redemption. It's that image. He gave his life on this cross, the image, but the characteristic, what he was doing was redeeming.
Yeah. Sure. Cool. All
that sidetracked us, but no, I saw that.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I didn't know, but I think that's our dynamic, man, because we broke it down, we chopped it up there. That's how I would
chop it up within the chop it up. But
we chopped it up within chop it up, baby.
No, but really, I don't know if you, at this point, off the cuff, if you got any remaining thoughts. But no, that's from what you're saying. That's all I really have to say more about these 4 aspects of the thought realm.
Yeah. So that's how I do it. I don't know if you call that a linear way of thinking by just backtracking information and then checking your perception. But that's how I would do it. Hopefully that goes deeply, but definitely I know by just trying to listen intently, I'm trying to be complete. So, but those are our closing thoughts then, and I think this is where we'll end it. So, if you liked this video, give us a like. You can always subscribe to the channel. I think we're gonna do our best, man, to keep bringing out this content. So, look forward to more of this type of content. And if you have any questions, ask in the comment section, and then I think you can also send an email to ask.jj@gmail.com. So looking forward to any questions, and we'll be glad to answer those. So yeah, this is episode 8 of Chop It Up. I'm Juan Escobar, and this is my bro, Austin James.
James
So
in the building.
and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.